Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this morning's episode. Hopefully, I'm not interrupting the talk the birds are giving. Today, I would like to speak about this idea of intelligent arrivals, and I was remembering a book I had written, when was it, 2013, called Cationic Imprints. And the way I had written this book was I had gotten inspired by Salvador Dali. And I don't know how many people know who Salvador Dali is, but if you see his painting, you'll probably know who he is. You've seen his artwork probably, but you might not know his face. Anyway, Salvador Dali, this incredible surreal artist that kind of really made the idea of surrealism in art lift off. Salvador Dali, this master painter, he would wear his pajamas, he would get a metal like bucket, he'd get a metal spoon, he'd set up his canvas and his all the stuff he requires to draw with. And he would begin when he would go into the semi-conscious state between wakefulness, between sleep. He would start drawing. He would start drawing, and excuse me. Salvador Dali, he would go into the semi-conscious state, he would start drawing, he would put the spoon on his knee, the metal bucket to the side of his leg, and as he was drawing, anytime he got too tired, he would sit beside the side of his bed and draw. And anytime he would get tired, the spoon would fall from his knees into the bucket, waking him up again for him to continue his drawing. Now, in my own life, I attempted something similar to this, but for a totally different context. I decided to record a book where I would go to sleep at night. Before going to sleep, I had a phone, and I would hold that phone in my hand, in my left hand, hold that iPhone in my left hand, and I would go to sleep. And so I would get ready for bed and everything, turn off the lights, go into bed, have my phone in my hand. But in order to kind of have a strategy similar to what's his name? Salvador Dali, I had to find a way to keep myself awake while doing the activity in that semi-awake, semi-dream state. I noticed that gravity was to my advantage, and something that you could do when you want to record vocally something that a painter can't do because he has to draw, through the stance of as if he's drawing on a wall. So what I mean by that is that every night my left hand would be like a right angle. So I want you to imagine like a 90-degree angle from my elbow, and so I'm lying down. Imagine someone lying down on the bed, and just the only thing that's vertical is your left hand, and you're holding the phone in it. Imagine. So the way I had balanced the phone in my hand, I had to stay awake to hold the phone in my hand, so I couldn't completely go to sleep. But my attention would drift off into more of a subtler, inert way of the moment. So I remember I recorded this book, and I would get to a certain point where I could just speak endlessly, and in my inner realms, I was observing my voice. That means I could hear myself speak. I was conscious, but I was also conscious that I was being conscious from a different angle. You know. Now, the reason I share this is because that book was about, certain opinions at the time my unconscious had about extraterrestrial intelligence, how to even engage it. There was a concept in the book that really kind of like it was motivational at first, but then I was like, oh, wait a minute. And the idea in the book was that on a cellular level, species can become galactic. It's not only on just complex formation where there's a relationship with the invisible galacto other, the galacto invisible other. When thinking about the idea of an intelligent arrival, it has to do with how novelty is discovered or how novelty visits you. There's some things in life that they discover you. There's something in things in life you have to discover. For example, there was a very hot day, and I remember somebody had just offered me like a glass of orange juice or something, some sort of this was in Iran when I was a kid. It wasn't orange juice. It was like ab talibi. It was like cantaloupe juice or something. If only rational events took place, it would be very easy to declare this world of ours as a rational universe where we can explain things rationally, linearly, and through a sequence of meaning. It's the arrival of intelligent factors in the state of mind that is content to see the 50% known and the 50% unknown. If the percentage, excuse me, guys, if the percentage is more for the unknown, then you're giving more authorization for the world to move first and then meaning to originate. If the known is more first, you gotta move before meaning can originate. That means there are people whose life's meaning seems to be momentary, and there are people whose life doesn't have a meaning unless they move in the moment in a certain way. That book, Cationic Imprints, is of course online for anybody interested in it. But in it, the whole idea was it was an altered state of a voice, you know? sometimes I look at human psychology and I think of it as an event. You know, I was saying this yesterday that I gave a talk a few days ago. I called it the Eventron or something, Eventum. And I had created these words where I looked at the concept of the atom as the smallest particle when it comes to looking at the physical component, the materialistic component of the human being. And then I wondered, what is the smallest unit of a human being? Now, there is this concept, of course, the concept of a meme. And a meme is the the smallest. I'm pretty sure I said skullest. The smallest uh, you is the smallest unit of an idea. You can say a meme. So I thought that human beings are not just ideas, that the psychology of the human being is a coagulation of events. And I noticed nobody has come to try to see this events with a sort of rendition of a particle-based nature. So I thought of creating the concept of the eventum. Just like how there's an atom, there's an eventum, you know? And when we break down the eventum, we break down the atom, we find the electron and the neutron and the proton, and I thought we break down the eventum, you know, and we find smaller events. And there is this dualistic thing about life and also the middle way component to it. That means I thought the concept of the neutron stays the same in both renditions, you know, the atom and the eventum. But the electron becomes the eventron, you know. So I had concluded that the smallest unit of the psyche is an event. An event made of smaller events, and eventually probably void. We reach a point, like, even though people are like, look at someone with photographic memory and they're like, for example, I actually wouldn't say I have per se. It became a photographic memory for me. In my childhood, I didn't have that much of a photographic memory. Still, even till now, I think my memory has to do with more of an emotional sub layer to my being. But anyways, the person is an event behind their eyes, and there is positively charged eventrons and there's negatively charged eventrons, and we find the neutral event and the positive event to be in the same, you know. That means imagine happiness and emptiness, they don't change in value, but the electron, you know, imagine sorrow and suffering just changes states based on light hitting it. That means really the person, I was thinking, like, we human beings are suffering a lot because we can see our suffering. You know, if we were somehow incapable of seeing our suffering, would the person be, would the person suffer still? There was this psychology video I was seeing where this lady had a stroke, and this stroke had affected a certain part of her brain. So when the psychologist was asking her to draw a cat, she only drew half of the cat. But then when the psychologist asked her, did you draw the cat completely, she would say yes. That means in her consciousness, her inner realm had become a bit isolated, you know, bit isolated from the outer realm due to whatever situation was gone, where when you pointed it out to her, suddenly her conscious mind would click and she would notice she hasn't drawn like the left part of the cat, but in her mind she felt she drew all of it, you know. there is something to the mind that it's constantly creating itself. It's even though we see the human body, but I think if we were to really slow it down, we are like breaking and being built on a very cellular level in every moment. you know just for example, how the skin of the human being is, how your hair is, how your body is. It's like this, the system has been designed to animate, but it hasn't been designed to stay. That means life is like your hair, it changes. Whatever you do, it changes. Yet, it is an opportunity where the blessings of nature welcome all those who see nature. Now, back to the idea of the intelligent arrival and how it relates to the atom. Just because we consider that the creature in front of its eyes is an object, behind its eyes somehow it's a subject, and subjects are alive to us through the linguistic simulation, through the acknowledgement of their validity and their simultaneity as we look at objects. When I look at that object, it suddenly is called a tree. My mind finds the word tree. My mind has called it a tree many times. I see that it's a tree. But when I think about is the language the object, I see it's not. So it's about a discrimination of intelligent reception and intelligent expression and how they can be different states. Maybe we receive life as a mind, you know? Maybe we receive life as not just per se a mind, but something way more. The intelligence of the human being moves in various angles. So I would say our psyche is trying to comprehend itself as the space between worlds. So we can say awareness or consciousness. Let's say awareness. Awareness is the space between the words, and the soul is the space between the event. That means if like life is like a sentence, its relationship of various events, there's also a space between these words. Sorry, if life is a sequence of words, there's a space between these. That means I don't know if we can be considered. I don't know if there was a sort of potentially eternal memory if space would be recorded as an event. That means right now existence has a event-oriented value. It has a form. It's as if there is something to see in this world. Can you imagine if we were all existing and we were hovering in space, seeing nothing, just emptiness? At least there's something to engage with. There is, as I've written in the subtitle, the game-based natural system. We're in a natural system, and it has classified itself. That means it's like the secret of nature is that it wanted to engage itself in multiple ways. That is very clear. So, if human beings conclude they are in a singular dimension, then the change of the world will be the world breaker. That means the moment you want to be static, you don't want to change, well, you're setting yourself up for an apocalypse. But if the person can realize everything changes, but now how is it changing? Or what is the free will's involvement in this change? Or what is nature's involvement in this change? Then it becomes a totally different approach to the game of reality. So I'm saying that in front of our eyes, we're made of atoms. Behind our eyes, we're made of eventums. And eventums It's a coagulation of events. So what does that mean? That means experience has been like a nature's alphabet. That means everything you have experienced so far till this point, it is accessible, but it is accessible in a different range, in a different way. You know, as if like when you cried and you saw the sunset, it's like the next time you see the sunset, you feel a bit sad and you might not know why, you know? You can totally see an interconnectivity between even the various events. You know, imagine you were a great billiard player and then suddenly everybody has surpassed you in billiard, you know? And then you reach a point where it's like that memory is still alive to you, but you are not in the same state of reality. I would say an intelligent arrival is an emergence of an image that the image gives a new self. Usually we imagine ourselves to be something, and then this something is going through other things, you know, going through a terrain of form. We can say intelligence is being put into a container. That means the atom is being contained by the experience of an event and process. So right now, I can feel that my body is moving my mind, even though my body is still and I'm speaking, or I can feel that my mind is moving my body. Now, if I feel my mind is moving my body, that is the suggestion of the multidimensional event. You know, if we're considering the inner realms to be multidimensional, we're considering the outer realms to have a sort of singular value, then the inner realms, regardless of the picture the person has, good, bad, you know, easy, complex, whatever, it's going to also be multidimensional. So it's like when in Rome, be Roman. When in a singular dimension state of awareness, be singular. When a multidimensional state of awareness, be multidimensional. When a void state of awareness, be the void. There's very epic story from Confucius, which I will share you right after I wear this sweater because it's getting chill. You know, Confucius say, wear sweater. I'm joking. There's a story about Confucius and his disciples walking, and Confucius and his disciples, as they're walking, they see an old man above this small waterfall, and the old man has a giant bucket. Sorry, not bucket, basket. Has a basket of stuff in his hand, right? And so the old man, as he's on the top of this waterfall, he suddenly falls. And all the disciples and the Confucius are like, no way, this old guy just fell from the waterfall. Like, imagine an incredibly simple and peaceful day, too. Like a sunny, nice day. You know, townspeople around the waterfall. Confucius sees the unthinkable. He sees this man fall into the water. His disciples are seeing it too. He sees the man fall into the water and then come out of the water as if nothing happened. The basket is dry, he's dry, everything is perfect. Even though they were all, you know, um, Confucius was the disciple of Lao Tzu, and that means they had a Taoistic perspective on reality. Now, even though they had a Taoistic perspective on reality, when the old guy falls, the disciples are like, "Oh my God!" You know. Confucius is the only one who doesn't get that startled, and he looks at the old man. Suddenly, it's as if he's just oddly staring at the old man. Then suddenly he smiles as if he's figured it out. Confucius walks up to the old man with the basket, and he's like, he says, "Kind sir, at first I thought you were human, but now I see that you're a spirit." So Confucius is seeing this old guy fall from the waterfall completely unharmed and nothing happened, even though he fell into the water, completely dry and untouched by the water. And he goes up to the guy and he's like, "Sir, I thought you were human, but now I see you're a spirit." Then the old guy gets offended and says, "I'm not a." The old guy says, "I'm not a spirit. What are you talking about, man? I'm not a spirit. I'm a human being." And so Confucius then actually gets shocked and he's like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "I'm a human being." And then Confucius realizes how realized this man was. The man says, when I fell, he says, "I'm a human being. It's just that when I fell into the water, I became one with the water. I was the water. When I stepped out of the water, I was myself." So the old guy looks at Confucius, he's like, "No, man, I ain't a spirit. I'm just a human being that knows how to walk through the world, that knows that every moment has its own energetic presence." That means in this life, it's strange. It was this idea of energy where my philosophy on energy has changed so many times in this life, guys. I can't tell you. From seeing energy like a battery to seeing energy like an endless river found in nature to seeing energy as dormant reserves and potential inside, the human being. For me, it is a very big question that if there comes greater intelligence, will we notice it? It's like that question that I've heard in religious circles brought up in theological discussions where they say, if the Christ, for example, came back, would people even notice him? Have we built a civilization where we can't pinpoint the honest anymore? The arrival of intelligence is in all the ways the states of mind can fathom. That means if we denied a sort of abstract inner realm based experience, and so now we're trying to find it through a secularized materialistic outer realm. That means I remember hearing Christopher Hitchens, this notable militant atheist, and he said something very interesting. He was saying, he was giving a talk at Google, and he said that when we look at religion, it's like there were many gods, then it became one God, and then Christopher Hitchens said people are getting closer to the truth all the time. You know, what that means is it's a regression, not regression, it's a shift from how our life was colored by our imagination more. And then at some point we discriminated between the two, and now our life is being colored by reality. But we notice that imagination is where what gives reality direction. That means when I think about the morning, when I wake up, what to eat, that's imagination right there. For me, the intelligence behind the eyes is freedom, and the intelligence in front of your eyes is discipline. And so the teachings of freedom make you realize the value of your sight. But teachings of discipline teach you how to use your sight. So I would say no longer a sort of separation of these two ideas, that man requires discipline and freedom, and what that implies is structure with energy. That means it's like the person can, of course, sure, you can keep life on a very simple level, and you can at any moment bring it there. That means, and this is something that I learned when I was younger, I just noticed that anytime a person makes a mistake, if they can be honest and at the same time go to the simplicity of, accept the simplicity of that mistake, nothing can bother them. You see, your mind is right now, we're trying to treat the mind like an object. Okay, we see creatures move around and we're like, I want to move my mind a certain way, not realizing that the mind isn't per se defined, its intelligence isn't based on movement. That means all those people in esoteric communities, going towards the unknown and thinking they're in communication with the invisible other, let me tell you, if it's like this, it's like you going to a market in a developing country, let's say, or I'll use more archaic terms, a third world country, and asking one of and the person, the people come and speak to you in an honest way. It was like that moment in fair. How would I say it? It's like I've been ripped off before, just because I didn't know the language and I didn't have an awareness to the value of the ride, for example. And that's what I'm saying, that the higher dimensions, if they see you're a fool, what happens to fools in this world? They become the peons of higher dimensions, not realizing that it is their birthright to be a causal presence in this dimension. You know, You know, once somebody on Discord asked me a good question. Said a really interesting comment. The person said, what was the exact words he said? He said, if you are, the person said, why are you giving your pearls to swine? You know? And I told him, if you think this is a pearl, then we will never get to an advanced civilization. You know, that means I am a strange speaker because I don't want what I say to be the peak. You know, that means this is my algorithm to this life, I could say. That I realized if the future is going to unfold, and let's say the system has 10,000 stages, 10,000 steps. Imagine like a system that has 10,000 steps to it. You know, guys, I'm reaching a complex point where I don't know how to share the image, but the feeling of what the image is, what what I feel the inner realm image of this is that when you look at 10,000 steps to the system, then the person has to think not of one step being the most valuable. That means all those people who want to climb a mountain to get to the peak, that system is flawed because you won't enjoy the journey up the mountain until you get to the peak. So you will avoid all your blessings in this life because you think you have to be blessed only in a certain way, you know? So it's when we can get a appreciation for the journey of life, then the spirit of the craft rhythmically finds you. This life is, you know, on some level we feel it's just lifeless. We feel we are alive, but we feel the world is lifeless. You know, when the person cries, it's like the atoms and the elements of the periodic table just stand silently watching, you know. There's something that I feared. You know, it's like when you're young, you fear power outside of you. But when you get older, the power you fear is the power inside of you. And this power inside of you is how the stakes for every opportunity increase. You see, it's the marathon runner running towards the end of the race. And so, regardless of how many rats give their lives for laboratory testing, we are, believe it or not, the actual rats in the rat race. Desire is like a coin. On one side, it has ridiculously advanced our technologies because somebody wanted like a cup holder in a car. You know, it advanced the technology. So one side of desire for the individual being is progression, but desire for the collective being can just be madness. That means imagine 8 billion human beings, they were carrying a giant boulder. Now imagine everybody wanted to pull the boulder in their own direction. I'll tell you a sci-fi story that I had made, which I'm getting this imagery from. I've shared in other talks before. I think like maybe a month ago. You see, I am to a certain level acquainted with, I guess, story architecture. And so I decided to create a sci-fi universe where in this sci-fi universe there was the human beings had been blessed with an extraterrestrial alien who had been kind, an advanced extraterrestrial alien that had come to Earth and was kind. But this alien had come earlier than now, when human beings were primitive, and had updated human society and given them incredible technologies. But the alien, before leaving, told human beings that they have to hold a rock. So the alien, before leaving, they manifested this giant rock, this giant boulder, and various percentage of the population of that advanced world where the alien had blessed those human beings with technology had to, with their backs, carry this giant rock, exactly in the way the alien had told them, you know? And the alien had told them in the story, if you put it down, all your technologies, all human technologies stop. Okay? And it has to be human backed, so they can't cheat and have technology keeping the thing above air. Human backs have to hit the rock. So the thing is, the alien leaves, and centuries and centuries and thousands of years go by. And human beings are still carrying the border, and one by one, like if you were a child in that sci-fi universe, your ancestor was probably number two, number 7 billion in carrying that rock or something, something. So the whole point of it was that these human beings, eventually they become so advanced, they surpass the aliens' technology. Okay? And then they have the courage to put down the rock. And they put down the rock and they realize nothing happened. You know? That means the alien had told them to have their backs on the rock, so it was an ethical collective activity keeping their civilization alive. That was one scientific way I had animated the idea. Guys, I will share something that I think is a crucial thing. I was blessed to learn it in my life. Um, I had a close friend, someone who I'm no longer in contact with, but somebody who was a close friend. And I remember he had invited me. His older brother was going camping, and he had invited me. And so we were around the fireplace, camp set up somewhere, I don't know, hours away outside of Toronto. And so while we were around the fire, I don't know, I think I was writing something. I was in a certain zone. And then I remember hearing Gabriel and his brother speaking. Like they were talking about something, and I was just listening as I was writing my own thing. And he was saying to his brother, uh, how much information you can take in this life by just listening. You see, people are more excited to speak than listen. For them, you can say when somebody has to speak, they pay way more concentration to speaking than to listening. But what if you could pay the same amount of concentration to speech to listening? Have you ever enjoyed what you have heard? I will tell you this, guys. This is one of the most beautiful things. I noticed this when I went to nature and I sat still and I just was there. I was just there and I started hearing all the levels of sounds, from the stream to the insects to everything in nature, to creatures moving on dry leaves, you know? And Gabby's brother, who was very smart, he was saying this to Gabby, this thing about listening. Like they were both talking about it. And after that, I had a different impression on like how much information, how much actual content am I missing out when I am not listening to my environment. Listening doesn't mean you follow. It just means, like, similar to Aristotle, it says it's a sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. That means when you listen to something, it's just conceptually touches you. Unless the sound hurts your ear and your ears beside a speaker, like, that's understandable how speech can hurt you because your ear is too close to the speaker. But anyways, listening is a divine art. I dedicated a book to this, which I haven't put online, but it's called The Ancient Listeners. A very phenomenal phase of my life. I wrote that book. There were two books I wrote pretty much in a week, and I wrote them at the same time. That means I would write one chapter of the other, then I would totally walk into a different emotional room and write the other. Because you see, the mind of man, the inner realms, people think it's just there for it to animate. If you really study your attention, you can navigate as your inner realms. But it doesn't mean just because in your inner realms you see, for example, trees lifting up from the soil and hovering into the air, that they're actually going to happen in the outer realms. The inner realms is a probability room. It's a room where you can see probabilities, yet it doesn't mean the probabilities are actualized. Now, there are some philosophers who've said the mind is in its own dimension, and any phenomena of design is embedded in universal memory. Now, that's a whole different argument, because when we talk about universal memory, the only way that concept makes sense if the universe is alive and personalized. That means it's an incredible question that, let's say there's extraterrestrial contact. Okay, even though Fermi's paradox, where are the aliens? We seem to be alone. But let's say one day extraterrestrials came down. They were like, all right, human beings seem decent enough. Let's go talk to them. And so the extraterrestrials came down, and we were like, oh, oh. We were like freaking out. The aliens come, and right there, I was thinking about what after the first handshake. But after the first handshake, how is the extraterrestrial going to talk to us? How are we going to communicate to it? And I realized that if human beings are able, just like how they see the alphabet, to see the visual world as a language, then there would be a way to communicate. We would probably have draw pictures where the alien is killing us, and draw a picture where the alien is like hugging us, and we're going to look at the alien and be like, hey, which one? Choose. you know And the thing is, we as human beings, if an extraterrestrial contact does happen, we're gonna wonder, so what now? Are we gonna learn the aliens' language, or the aliens gonna learn our language? Or is it gonna be an energetic communication on a co-creative inner realm platform? Like, what is it gonna be? So that's the thing. I feel certain transformation in regards to how language is keeping the simulation of culture need to arise. And that can only happen through honest living. That means all those people in the world who have disvalued yourself. What if nature was waiting for you? Can you imagine? What if you were the greatest violinist and there was a violin in somewhere in the world, like, when's this guy gonna get here? I can't play the violin, by the way. Yeah. We need modern. It's like, here's the thing. They say the first generation built something. The second generation builds on the first thing, takes it to fruition. The third generation goes and does something else, which technically would mean that, for example, my son would in the like, I don't have a son, but I'm saying in the future, if I had a son, imagine my son would come and expand my work, and then my grandson would totally do something else. Yeah. For me, the definition of intelligence is different. Just because people read the same definition to a word in a dictionary doesn't mean that word means that, you know? Like, what is poetry? It's the fearless usage of words. It is to care for something enough to be able to do something with it. Anything you don't care about, trust me, even the lords of karma is like, yo man, this guy doesn't care. Why should I keep this around for him? You know? I'm being playful, of course. The lords of karma is it's a mythological idea. There was this incredible genius, what's his name? Scientist who had gone and studied. This is before Alan Watts. Some guy who, believe it or not, I saw a picture of him. But he kind of looks like Alan Watts. He looks like Alan Watts' like secret cousin. Nobody knew there was another cousin, like Alan Watts' cousin. But anyways, the guy is somebody else completely. And this man was a scientist, very, very well educated, high class, high caliber scientist, you know, from great universities, and he had gone to Eastern traditions like a modern intellectual mind, being like, what are these ancient people saying, And he went there to try to figure it out, and he had found a way to correlate science with mysticism, but with more Taoistic mysticism. He had found a way to see parallels between the Tao Te Ching, not in regards to scientific principles, but in regards to, he had seen different mystical practices, and he had noticed like the meme skeleton of the ideologies. And so the person had kind of said that it's like, just like we have two hemispheres of the brain, it's poetically like there is two kinds of urges, inspirations for movement, you know? As if you go and look at the left side of the brain, it has to be very rational and precise, you know? Very laid out and clear with structure, you know? The left side of the brain, let's say. But the right side of the brain is creative. It's like, let's see what happens when we just move in space before we give space a blueprint, you know? The inner realm is pretty much how the world is moving the self. The outer realms is how the self is moving the world. And when the person comprehends this, they realize behind their eyes, their sense of cause is causal point is unknown, and their effect is the known. Or let me say it like this. Right now my eyes are open in the conscious waking state, and I'm looking at a tree, literally looking at a tree. And when I'm looking at that tree, it's as if I can close my eyes, and when I close my eyes, I still see the tree there. I can keep it maybe for a couple seconds in that visualized imaginative atmosphere. So I can still see the tree, I can see the photo. Now, as I'm speaking, the photo's getting faint. My eyes are closed right now, and I could see the outer realm image becomes faint, 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 and it gets dissolved into non-visual sensation as the stable point. So what does that mean? That means when you close your eyes, you are not a form, you are a feeling. But when you open, you're more like a sensation-based entity, you know. But when the visual landscape gives us access to stories, especially if we give everything a name, you know. For me, well, I was like, oh my God, human beings, they named everything. They named themselves, they named emptiness, they named God, they named, you know, everywhere there was a name. We named objects, you know, we named events, we named time, everything were named. It's like, what is this? So it's like some person working in a store and using one of those devices to kind of put serial numbers on, stamp serial numbers on different products. You know what I mean? The person's like, okay, you get a name. It's like a politician, you know, you get a name, or sorry, not a politician, Oprah. Like Oprah, you know. Oprah Winfrey, she had this show where she would like make a lot of people's days awesome by just giving them a car or something at her show, you know. And she was like, a car for you and a car for you, and we human beings, our species was like, and a name for you and a name for you, and this object gets a name and this gets a name, and even we're gonna name our names and call it subjects, you know. For me, if knowledge is not proportional to the ability of the human being increasing, it is most likely a simulation of knowledge. Do you know? That means it's like, it's the issue we find. Like for me, scientists, they are uh, incredible minds, mighty minds. Science is a weapon. Not everybody can you wield it. Not everybody can truly comprehend its implication. You know, this is why scientists and Zen masters get along, because the meaning to an experiment that never has an end is endless. It's nothing. You know, I can sit here and endlessly, like a bird, like a blue jay, you know, chirp the song of a civilization, only to realize that it is such a collective force that honestly it's like weather condition. The weather has to help us, do you know? We ultimately know. Gandhi said something about nonviolence. He said that nonviolence is a very important approach, because it means as we go more forward in time, the independence of the human mind is increased. That means there's a force field around the individual in a great civilization, you know, a force field that is as if we're holding the individual in honor. The mind is words, and words come from worlds, and worlds reach a point where if you reverse engineer, here's the thing. I consider language to be a dualistic technology. I consider we're in a dualistic simulation right now. That's why our society has morality, and we consider philosophers are considering the nature of the human being. Is it good? Is it bad? Like, what the fuck is up with the human nature? You know? Excuse my language, but like, really, the question is that intense. And so we are in the dualistic, in the linguistic simulation. That means when you communicate to another human being, you have to do it as a character in a story that is relatable to some degree to their story, you know? And it doesn't mean that you change your story, but it means you choose to be a single piece. I think a lot of miscommunication on the planet is not because people are not able in communicating. The issue is that people don't, it's like chess. You gotta make a move and wait, and life makes a move. And then you observe that move, and then you wait, and then you observe a move and you make a move, you know? Okay, guys, HGGS says something very interesting in the chat section. I'm very fascinated by stories of mystics because their tales transform the landscape more than focus on the person themselves. Yeah, the eyes are deeper than oceans. The eyes of people are deeper than oceans. That means I feel it doesn't matter if it's a person, 90-year-old person, or a 9-year-old kid, you know? Both of them have their experiences, have value, have architecture uncommon to the human collective landscape, you know? Okay, Charles in the chat section says, it is a limit or a creative guideline. Question. Both are interpretations, yet the first blocks the way while the other opens it up. This is the power of interpretation. The beginning of the first line is a bit vague, but I understand what you're saying. It's a very incredible point. It's about flow. This concept of flow states, whether you're a Tai Chi or Qigong master and the rivers of energy in your body are moving perfectly, you know, like the clouds in the sky, or it's a sort of you're a rock star on a stage, you know, in that intoxicated escapism, in the zone, kind of being your life on stage, you know. Both of them are very advanced states, yet the conscious retention from those states are different, you know. You see, it's like because we have thought we are nothing more than objects and subjects, everything is revolving around that. And when we take objects and subjects more seriously than actual experience, that means experience is a room that surpasses language. So I would say people think their mind is in their body because their brain is. I would say because the brain is in the body, your body feels in your mind. So that's the different approach of it. Are you just living the life of an object? Or is all the abstract subjective considerations a superiority in regards to the experiential presence of the being, regardless of the validity of the personality? There's a poet in the Sufi tradition named Rumi. I think many people know him. Uh, believe it or not, there's this website. He says he's the most read poet in America, and I was like, my God, this man's voice has gotten everywhere. Sorry, not in America only. I think just in many countries around the world, this poet's voice has found audiences. And so Rumi says, uh, it relates to the concept of the intelligent arrival. That means I'm wondering about how intelligence is going to appear in the future. And the poetry, Rumi in his poetry, he's speaking about the evolution of the attention of being. And this is his poetry. This is the poem. He says, I died as a mineral and I became a plant. I died as a plant and I rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was man. He says, why should I fear death? When was I less by dying? I shall die once more. To soar with angels, I shall die once more as man. To soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood, I must pass on to that which no mind has ever conceived. And that's my point, ladies and gentlemen. That evolution doesn't have a point because it's moving beyond it. So in that poetry, Rumi's saying as if intelligence wasn't per se just based on the genetical foundation, it was this higher dimensional navigator, you know? As if the attention evolved from first being as a mineral, as if we experienced what that phenomenon was like. It's as if like it's not per se a linear evolution, but it's an evolution of a mind that's trying to see as much as it can before it perishes, you know? So Rumi is saying he was a mineral, you know? The evolution was, it was as if there was no life. He wasn't a poet. He wasn't Rumi then. It was just a mineral. And then he became a plant. His consciousness moved to that mode. From the mineral kingdom, he went to the plant kingdom. From the plant kingdom, his consciousness lived a life as the plant and went on to the animal kingdom. You know, from the animal kingdom, he lived a life like that and he came to the human kingdom. And in his poetry, he's saying he's going to go from the human kingdom to what he is poetically saying the angelic kingdom. But what it means is right now, human life is being like at the front door of the universal mind, you know, poetically. And Rumi is saying, even after my imagination, he is surpassing not just reality, but also going towards that which is beyond imagination. And what is beyond imagination is beyond language that can be put into a story. So whoever you are listening to this, is your life a story? Or is it the presence of the movement of a grand happening that we, by mere chance, seem to be calling life? You know, this was when Buckminster Fuller was asked, "What is God, man?" Buckminster Fuller said, "God is not a noun; it's a verb." Just take that in. It's not an object that you can give value to. It is an event. It's dynamic. You know. And then we had someone around those times also, an Alfred Whitehead, where he says life is, you're not just a bunch of particles hovering in the middle of nowhere, you're a process. You are a process of cosmic proportions, you know? So that's the thing. I was like, what are human beings waiting for? They are waiting for a permission that is both from the inside and the outside. Outside civilization, its structure and blueprints need to update. That's the external authorization for an advanced civilization. And there's the inner authorization. That means it's like every human being has a responsibility for contributing to an advanced civilization, but the responsibilities are divided between a personal responsibility and an impersonal responsibility. What does that mean? That means the impersonal responsibility, the personal responsibility means if in this life you study your inner realms, let's say you're someone who you're living on an island somewhere, just like very tribal like, So if you just attend honestly to your inner realms, that is fine. That's the personal purpose. You realize you exist here too. That's important in life, to realize that if you are also part of that humanity, you know. So if you're on an island, yeah, you gotta take care of the individual. As Jordan Peterson says, clean your room as go clean your room, go clean your island of mind, you know, of your inner realms. But if you also realize that once you are satisfied, your thirst for the inner realms is satisfied, you're going to realize the value of the outer realms, and that becomes an impersonal purpose. Which that's honestly who these talks are for. I'm speaking to a species that cares for how far it has come so far. You know. There was this video I remember seeing. It was I don't know what it was, but the director was next level. He was filming this guy getting angry, this like film from the 70s, and the guy was shouting, "I'm a human being, god damn it. It's like I can get angry or something." I don't remember the exact lines, but it was like I just remember that intensity. "I'm a human being, god damn it." The guy was shouting this, an angry man shouting this in an unknown world. "I'm a human being, goddamn." And so that made that one sentence, I don't know, just as a passive viewer, struck such a chord as if I was a guitar, and like that moment was like the ultimate strum, you know? That there's a human dimension that we still haven't pinpointed subjectively to incorporate it in law. That means no longer we need philosophers, psychologists. You know what I want to see? I want to see future schools. There is, instead of one teacher, a teacher from the major branch of the STEM fields and just different arts and the humanities and whatever, we find a teacher, let's say a scientist, a philosopher, a religious person, different teachers, okay, from different branches of the way people have looked at how we can know things on this planet. Okay, so imagine a bunch of teachers come in, and then all the students are sitting on one side, and the teachers are sitting also on the other side. And there occurs the whole class is a debate, is a debate between teachers and students, do you know? Like 50%, and I don't know how to say it, but um, the thing is, the more we acknowledge ourselves as multidimensional beings, that means as we live, I mean, intelligence is defined as being able to vary yourself in different states. Okay, being able to adjust to different states. That's really how what we can say intelligence is, and survival. Now, it's like also considering that how are the inner realms adjusting and what are the value of the inner realms, because if I right now there's a coffee cup in front of me, okay, imagine I think this coffee cup is the truth of the universe. I am like, why am I looking for truth? It's right here in my hand. And let's say I decide to drink from this coffee cup, and then I feel as if I am the ultimate truth. I drank from the coffee cup of truth. I'm the ultimate truth. I can see living my whole life. Imagine poetically, this is hypothetical, but I'm saying hypothetically, imagine like only seeing coffee, not seeing anything else. You know, that's the danger of trying to wear an ideology like a mask. After some point, you might forget what your real face is, because the real face is the willingness to go into the unknown. Imagine the world was not the world you knew. Imagine everything you had considered of value had different angles to it. Everything. Every person you have seen in this life, every movement could have been perceived from a different angle, therefore rendering a different dimension of meaning. The game to play is to discover the nature of the attention, and most people who go towards trying to understand what their attention is or what this whole consciousness is in the moment they realize the instantaneity of its being. The instantaneity of the being is a singular dimension, and most people who go to that state of mind, that those are the people who feel that everything is oneness. Okay, they have come to a point where they are seeing everything at once, you know, instantaneous knowing. Now, if we were to dive deeper into this ocean, we would realize that when we reverse engineer from duality, we go to the singular. When we reverse engineer from the singular, we go to the void. Now, here's the majestic question, the question of eons. Where do we go when we reverse engineer the void? Where do we go when we reverse engineer the void? And it took me a while to get to this answer, guys. We get to the infinite. And if you were to reverse engineer from the infinite again, you would get back to duality. That means the void is sandwiched between the singular and the infinite. The dualistic is sandwiched between the infinite and the singular. And infinity is sandwiched between the duality and the void. Because, guys, I mean, we can sit here talking about knowledge, but Alexander the Great understood something, that when he passed away in his will or something, he had said that when he's on, like they would put great warriors and conquerors, they would burn them on a boat. That means they would put them on this ship and they would set the ship on fire, and quietly the boat would go in the water, burn, and eventually be engulfed, as if time consumed that human being. Um, or I could say it in a different poetic sense. Time uh, guided the being elsewhere. The ultimate question: who is this world for? What is it for? And why is that for being a for? This life is arising to the mind as a blank page of spatial engagement. That means I can endlessly reduce the world to just correlations, endless correlations, you know? I could say this isn't a tree in front of me. This is 99.9% of the atom's emptiness in front of me, you know? If we equate the meaning of life to the word opportunity, then we ask the next question, what do we do with the opportunity? And that's where you find the blank page. I feel similar to how soldiers run on a battlefield. Every human being is running in a sort of emptiness. And I feel subconsciously our paranoia, our fears, all our inefficiencies and incapabilities are coming from a subconscious paralysis of an idea to the void. And so when the human being comprehends the zero dimension, as I've said, you comprehend the zero dimension, you will find the ultimate content with all movement. The man who can be still and silent saw the world move. See every word, Nature is like a symphony of energetic rhythms. I remember noticing that a squirrel, when you look at how a squirrel runs, it's like a sine wave, but from a vertical angle. When you look at how a snake moves, you see it's like in a horizontal angle, like a sine wave. And then when you look at the particle wave of a photon, you also see the infusion of these two dimensions. That means nature is very rhythmic. We are in a rhythmic universe, and somehow we feel we are images. So it's the evolution of an image into a rhythm. And so this is why many people have said trust is the element that advances civilizations. Because when a civilization can have a certain level of truthfulness, that means it's the people are like, okay, let's just calm down and build something, and that's how it happens. From Christian wisdom, the story of the Tower of Babylon comes to us. And the Tower of Babylon was the effort of all humanity united under one language to build a tower that reached the level of the gods. Do you know? That means there was one advantage to believing in gods, and it would definitely inspire you. They're like, why do you believe in God? Free inspiration, man. It makes me feel good when I feel I can become a god one day. It's like, wow, it's like a god level ego. If emotional stability is prioritized over intellectual precision, the sharpness of the stories of man will no longer make the nature bleed. You see, what it is you can control and access as much as you can see. Right now, when I honestly think about what I can say in these talks, I can see that it has to do with how far my eyes have perceived and honestly a continuity of an effort. So when I give these talks, imagine like when someone writes, there is an energy their hand is using to move, right? And so it's like that the mere action of writing, uh, the event has an I don't know how to say it. It's like I feel when I'm speaking, my mind is writing. And I feel like that's the advantage of the mind. We don't understand it rhythmically, but one day we're going to look at it as antennas, and children are going to go wherever they are in the world, and then just they're going to sit down and close their eyes for a moment, and then they're going to realize that they can actually process. That means even if your eyes are closed and there isn't the visual explanation of seeing to believe, there's still a presence. So we're studying intelligence not limited to a certain range of the electromagnetic frequency. Sorry, not frequency, a certain frequency, range of frequency of on the electromagnetic spectrum. That means it's like I was like, whoa, like do if there were ghosts, would they be able to see Wi-Fi waves? You know, we are designers. We are nature designing itself to a very strange sophisticated level. And the thing is, when we can discriminate between the inner realms and the outer realms, you will see your inner realms you only get to see. But your outer realms, if you live for it, the world gets to see it. And I think this has to do with just basic psychology. When you see children in school, when you see even certain phases that adolescents go into, you know, you see that psychology is getting very offended by the attention. That means if things change too much, it could overwhelm the child, but the child doesn't realize you are walking in a world where at the end of it there's an ultimate change. So to fear change is meaningless in a world where the whole system is designed for the candle to melt at the end. But doesn't mean just because the candle melts, the light of the candle doesn't have meaning. And that's why I'm saying life is really, its meaning is an opportunity. Every breath is really an opportunity. There were some people who didn't, even certain yogis, that they no longer had a relationship with the world that was conceptual. So they weren't defined by their personality, they were defined by their alertness. They had reached a point where they were just beings of attention. Their attention would just arise. When it arose, phenomena happened. When it faded, it didn't. And regardless of the outcome, the world didn't need to be a story, because prior to language there was something here. So it's not that your atoms are ancient, but it's that your psychology is also the echo of the mind of the universal sector so far. It's as if I feel that even though I have walked like in nature, and I felt, why don't animals love human beings? Because I understand they don't have a psychology and all this. They're not their brains are not as complex as human beings. But I was like, if you saw something in your environment that was more advanced than you, how would you react? How would you respond to the arrival of intelligence in your vision? And I realized that it would intimidate, but yet it would fascinate. And so if something intimidates you, yet simultaneously fascinates you, it's as if, trust me, destiny can't give you a bigger hint. Because the emergence of ability requires to actually locate the space for it. That means if you're a guitar player, what do you see you do? You go try out for that talent show thing. Do you know? You create the opportunity, you create the space for the skill. And sometimes in these talks, I think certain people who listen, they might kind of see um, uh, uh, how the pen moves. You know, the attention is very fascinating. You can identify with everything, and you can identify. You have such freedom to identify with anything that you can also identify with nothing. Did you know that? You know, you know. It's like they come and tell someone, "What's your identity?" It's like nothing, and the person's like, "What do you mean?" It's like, because everything is in nothing, man. What do you want me to identify with? With a pebble and a light beam? You know? How do we know? How do we not know simultaneously all these eons that we've been thinking we're individual, objectified, subjectively maintained genetical memory? What if at the same time we were a collective being? What if we are a giant movement? What if humanity was the ultimate self of every human being? What if you were not here to become an idol in your own spotlight, but in the spotlight of a world that's calling for something? Do you know them? Do you know how it feels to me? I think when the people, the children of the future generations get this vibe as a signal just goes to them. It's like, here's the thing. It's like, imagine you are part of a family, you are part of a warrior species. Okay, imagine right now as I'm speaking, imagine human beings, we are a next level warrior class species. You know, now imagine the child is born, goes into the educational system, but the child hears odd things happening, and we realize, because we're a warrior class civilization, we are in battle with what? Let's say an extraterrestrial invasion of our homeland. So the child is living in this bubble of happiness, only to realize, wait a minute, the front lines are calling. But the front lines are not physical violence. It's not war. War is just a waste of energy, you know? Simply said. You know, there's better ways energy can be used, you know? So that imagine being born, being a child of a warrior, actually being a child of a warrior class civilization that's not even hiding a wail for its youth of what the world actually is. And so the child realized that it was as if like you're like a player who goes on the field, who's been waiting to go on the field, you know, eons waiting to be here. And so now you're on the field, and based on your analysis of the value of the environment and how that becomes an inner environment, then you go forth. Do you know what it feels? It feels like humanity is like a ship that's 8 billion human beings are on this giant ship that both ends of it, they can't see each other. This giant ship, and suddenly in one part of this giant ship where 8 billion human beings are living and the ship is in unknown waters, imagine in one side of it there's a hole in the boat. And some human beings notice this hole, but some people on the other end of the ship don't realize the ship has a hole in it. Okay? And so what's happening is endless generations of people are manifesting, you know, as if different video game characters are logging into this multiplayer massive physical simulation of a map of a world. And so, what's going to happen? Some people are going to see that hole in humanity's ship and they're going to run to fix it. Their natures can't hold back. It's the human nature. You see, it doesn't matter if human beings hurt each other or if an alien came and whacked a human being with a stick. Other human beings would be like, "What the fuck's this alien doing?" You know? We would suddenly become concerned. Why? Because we speak the similar language of existential opportunity. We should be very humble as a species. because the unknown is standing right beside us. It's the giant in which we're on its shoulder, and the giant is, how can I say it? So far, so good. No meteor has hit Earth. No cosmic force has destroyed this species. We haven't pressed the buttons of self-extinction yet. So far, so good. But how long will it be good? And what is the meaning of this good? And so it's like, it's the person has a struggle. They're like, what does that mean? Should I like have this approach where I see a image I want of the future and to run towards that, or does it mean endlessly looking for the best image? And you realize, whatever your analysis in life, you are a certain chord in the cosmos. And this is why one of the hardest things to accept in life is yourself, the simplest way it is existing. And you have to, believe it or not, even accept energy in a simple way, or you can't use it. That means if the artist is intimidated by the brush, the artist is never going to pick up the brush. So if you're intimidated by the unknown, you're never going to explore. And so we have to build a civilization that has a purpose. And Jordan Peterson painted this picture that, for example, when we see the relationship of religion and the secular modern society, it's like literally bullying, but bullying that turned into a street fight. You know? That means one ideological system had a louder voice back in the day, so defined a lot of things. Now this ideological system has a louder voice and is bullying the other. Do you see? But we're not realizing, in the middle of all these ideological wars, it's just creatures that are breathing the simple air. Do you see? That's why, regardless of whatever, on some level, a major priority for an advanced civilization is to treat human beings as tourists in time. You're like a tourist to existence. You're touring existence for a little while. Now, if the idea of reducing suffering is to create a civilization that makes this tourist's experience great, and I feel there is something strange that we as human beings don't realize. It is a blessing. That means there was a time where I was thinking about the concept of money, do you know? And I was thinking about the idea of money as we, let's say 2,000 years from now, what would our concept of currency be? Do you know? And it really is based on how much we're individual. That means you only need money if you're an individual, you know? But energy, raw energy, like, atoms don't need money, man. Yeah. Man may forget nature, but nature will never forget you as long as your heart is beating. Because what the world we're awakening to is actually the dead dreams of our ancestors. That means, I don't know how many people feel this, but I sometimes feel like an Olympian holding this torch of DNA, and I have no idea who the really, like, far ancestors were, you know. But I just have this feeling that it's as if I am the bearer of a genetical opportunity. That is very natural now. Right now we can see like something that strangely has infiltrated is like the oil from the steam engine has sipped into the morning coffee, and that the world today has become a situation where the you can't even trust the food, yet even thinking of trusting people, or even trusting us, trying to build an advanced civilization, or a Tower of Babylon approach where we try to build one language again, a proto multidimensional language of experience and with sensitivity to life. You know. I feel like a concept arose to me. People should start meta schools everywhere. Because you see, knowledge is the application of various methods. You right now, let's say you go do something and you had no idea about it and you just try it. Okay, that would technically, some person on this planet would look at you and be like, I can see this guy's falling into a certain method, a certain pattern of doing something. That means you might even have no clue, but you might be right now doing something that's a method, you know? Because life is the division of a point into multiple angles. This is why people, they don't just, I mean, in certain cultures they do still, but they don't just suddenly and spontaneously marry each other. It's not like a poker game where it's like, okay, this is it. The people have to experience various events together to see how each other's minds care. You see, that means people are never their real self, because there's layers to the human being. That means it's like there's a certain idea in morality where they're like, they went to the liar and they're like, why do you lie? And the liar's like, why shouldn't I? And the person, the moralist, was like, excuse me, what do you mean? Do you know? And the liar says, do you think that person sees me? Do you think right now, you thinking I'm a liar, you're not lying to yourself? Do you see what I mean? That means, and the whole point of it is the guy eventually. I'll tell you a moral of. I'm going to tell you a Zen story. Just keep this idea on pause. I'm going to add something to this. Okay. The moralist gets shocked, and tells the guy's story here. There we go. Wield your attention well. We are in an era where what was before a sword at the belt of the person has now become their vision of the moment. Your mind is uh, a divine weapon, but also a divine shield. And if you're wise, you never need to use them. In the art of war, it says the superior warrior is a warrior that defeats the opponent without raising his weapon. Just take that in. That's the power, the true ability of the mind, that you are smart enough to realize that it has a short-term value and long-term value. If the short-term value only responds based on the desire, you miss out on certain long-term values. And it's a symphony. People don't realize it. One of the coolest ways to look at life is like every phenomena, whether it's a tree, bird, cloud, sky, you know, or giant robotic dogs running in a, I don't know, probably a betting sport, sci-fi betting sport. You see, regardless of what it is, they are all like different instruments, part of the symphony of the sensory simulation of reality, which is moment to moment its own art. So honestly, I feel like living art. I feel like I'm art, you know? It's like, my heart agrees, with at least, 3/5 of it, yeah. Even the word heart is like he space art, you know? Oh man, language is like clay, honestly. You know? Honestly, the same way, like I could totally see how religion was a metaphor for thought, you know? Imbue a shape, a form with life. We look at an object and it has a meaning in our life suddenly. Really, Meister Eckhart hit it on, you know, very accurately hit the target when he said, the same eyes that I see God are the same eyes that God sees me. This Gnostic priest from 1,000 years ago. You know, now I can share the moralist story. The story the moralist tells that guy. And probably people have heard this, but I'm going to share it if you're someone new listening. The story is about the Zen master back in the day. I forget his name, but he had like one name. Like there weren't, he didn't have a last name. It was just, he was just known by one name. Rashida. I don't know, something like that. So this Zen master, okay, he had a temple, he had a bunch of disciples. One of the disciples starts stealing. The other, it makes the disciples uneasy. They go to the Zen master and they're like, "Hey man, this guy's stealing. What do we do?" And the Zen master's like, forgive him, forget it. Just forget it. And then the thing keeps continuing. The guy steals again, and the disciples are like, "Okay, this is getting messed up." And they go to the Zen master, and they're like, "Hey, man, this guy's stealing." And Zen master's just like, he's like, "Forget it, forgive him, let it go," you know. And so this happens, and then the third time, the disciples stealing does this. All the disciples have had enough. They're like, "Okay, what is this? This makes no sense," And so they go get that one disciple, and they take him to the Zen master, all of them. And they're all of them at once are like, "Hey man, you got to get rid of this guy," or at least one of them speaks for all of them. And it says to the disciple, one of the disciples says to the Zen master, "You got to either kick this guy out, or we're all leaving." You know. And there's this long pause, and the Zen master looks at him and says, "Then leave." And there's this intense moment where the disciples are like, "What the fuck, man?" You know? And then the Zen master says, "You guys can leave because you know the difference between right and wrong. This poor soul, this poor brother doesn't even know, the difference between right and wrong. Who will teach him?" And then the disciples were like, "Holy shit, he's got a point," with tears in their eyes. So, guys, life is beyond language, and it's an event. It's a magnificent cosmic event. I don't know how we have egos. How we can be separate from our experience. For me, I feel the way I see dimensions to the world is like right now, my awareness is being this endless sort of spherical moment. So I feel like I am my whole moment, and the content in it has always been changing. You know, It's as if, just like I'm saying different words, imagine like the Buddhic view is seeing the soul transmigrating in different incarnations. It's like as if an eternal being is speaking through manifestation to itself. There's a quote by Swami Krishnananda, this yogi. He says it was very intense quote. And he says, religion is God remembering himself. As if that before there was man, there was God. So if God is the cause and effect is man, you know, the cause hasn't gone anywhere. It's just that the effect can never be equal to the cause in a system where, you know, it's as if God experiences friction too. Really, every person is an artist. I don't know. It's like nature is an artist, even if the person doesn't consider they're an artist. Nature is art. It's just art that you haven't drawn yet. It's like art you didn't draw, but the inner realms feels like because your attention is the canvas, is the spotlight. You can project any ideological conception in your inner realms. you know and if children they activate to their inner realms, it becomes really revolutionary. But the thing is, the child has to experience a couple illusions first. you know in my channel, I had an Alan Watt video, which I honor Alan Watts. And I don't know, for a second I was thinking about the politics of karma. And what happens to a system if everybody does something different, or everybody does something the same? Sometimes I think if human beings attempt to build an advanced civilization, like in the Tower of Babylon, would the gods suddenly make human beings dismantle? Is like an advanced civilization only an opportunity for in a certain wave of history, if history was a pattern repeating like a sine wave? And honestly, the idea of history is dependent on time. And even Albert Einstein has said, we created time so everything doesn't happen all at once. And people wondered why Albert Einstein's hair was messed up, because honestly, this man was having timeless ideas, you know? I feel there are four dimensions every human being needs to learn to pilot through. And then I can say you activate as an advanced communicator. Four dimensions you got to study. Now it's up to you to choose from which dimension you want to get experiences the most. That's where your free will comes in. But what is the landscape? This landscape of life, subjectively simulated objective life, you know that means, what is the value of free will? What's the point of it? So here's the thing. Upon studying the framework of the dimensions, the designer's mind is accessible. You can't design anything if you don't have probabilities and variables. So anytime I come to do anything, I sprinkle the moment with chaos and order. And when I sprinkle the moment with chaos and order, that means I am trying to see the whole environment. So we start from the dualistic mind and speech. Then we can either pilot like the yogis, where they would use their speech to take people to the void. And we have the the Eastern Enlightenment would make the person enlightened through nothing, the through emptiness, through the void. The Western Enlightenment would make the appreciated enlightenment through the concept of infinity. That means, I would say, if we were to draw two banners for, as I know it's too general of a classification. I mean, I'm just saying this playfully, but I'm saying if we wanted to classify Western civilization and Eastern civilization, just for speech's sake of thinking of those ideas that way, you know, everything is can appear more complex than it simply is seen. But I'm saying that if we were to look at this Western Eastern civilization situation, I would say we can say the flag of Western Enlightenment would be the infinity sign. The flag of Eastern Enlightenment would be the number zero. That means human beings, they have been identifying not just with different physical components to their world, but different dimensional potential outcomes. That means we've been seeing faces not just in clouds, but we've been seeing faces in everything, you know? So I would say that these four dimensions, I call it the ring of the absent heaven. And the idea of it is that there are four dimensions. I said this earlier, but I'm going to repeat again because it's an idea that I feel I have to give it a voice because it's necessary to navigate. Four dimensions, whoever you are in this life. And ask yourself, you can sit down one evening with a cup of tea and a notebook in front of you and actually wonder like which one of these dimensions you've experienced so far or how far your comprehension of it is. These four dimensions, I've simplified it to these four symbols: 0, 1, 2, infinity, the infinity symbol. These four symbols. And these four symbols, the reason I call it ring of the absent heaven is because they are cyclical. That means at the end of infinity, we come back to the void. Then we go through the singular, then through the dualistic, then towards the infinite, then to the void, then to the singular, then to the dualistic, then to the infinite, then to the void, or reverse movement of the whole ring, based on which hand you can wear the ring, which hemisphere of the brain chooses to look at those dimensions, poetically. So these four dimensions, the zero dimension, these are from a designer's standpoint. That means I'm speaking to you as a designer here, really. But a designer that has looked at the designs of existence and experience as well, you know. So I would say the zero dimension is space. So right now, as I'm sitting on this chair, I notice my space between, for example, me and this chair in front of me, that table, that tree in the yard, that bird flying in the sky, the actual space of this, what I consider to be the blueness of the sky, the sun, different things. So I notice there is space, and I notice that if I was to move in this world, there needs to be space. So space is one of those primary things, and space equals to absence of form through a certain way of definition. So if space is the absence of form, so pretty much I would recommend just go buy like an expensive canned drink and go to your yard and just pour that canned drink or whatever drink into the somewhere. Just pour it out. Go in the yard though. Go in nature and just pour it in the dirt, you know, somewhere. You might be messing up the day of some insects, but it's fine. Yeah. There's casualties and great efforts. And so what I mean is just take a sip, then actually take a few sips from it, then spill the rest of the drink, you know, in the dirt. And the reason I'm saying this is because realize how something can be there and it can also not be. That Alexander the Great, when he was on that boat and it was burning, his arms were open because he was saying to the world, I came here, I conquered, and I had everything, yet even me, the great conqueror, I'm leaving empty-handed. You know? So once you are comfortable and content with space, both in known conscious waking state and also in the unknown. For me, what this whole fascination of modern culture with the psychedelic state of mind is that they want to actually experience the unknown, but they want the unknown to be a continuation of their inner realm story. That means there's an unknown which you can say, yeah, it's the mystery of your own eyes, and then there's an unknown which is the mystery for all eyes. You know? We're like, is that a black hole in space? You kidding me? Are we lost inside a bowling ball? A bowling ball hole? That's my theory on a black hole, by the way. Mr. Within's bowling ball black hole theory. We're inside the black hole. That means we are in a pocket of a higher dimension. I wouldn't be surprised, it's like we are information that really, like, even though I feel I'm living here, but I feel the world and all of nature and the forces of nature have been given a greater permission than me to exist. That means I consider nature to be actually a higher dimensional entity because it has an authorization that surpasses my individualism. Right now, I like it because if you look at it as from only a materialistic angle, you're a talking statue, and statues don't talk. You know. So if immaterialism through abstraction hasn't been allowed, I mean, I'm like, what is this? Is everybody just waiting for scientific advancement only to bring innovation? How many moments in life can innovate the person that are not rational at all? You know, I remember when my grandfather had passed away on the paternal side when I was 10, and I was at the funeral in Iran. It was a situation where I was walking in the graveyard, and as I was seeing the different graves, I also saw a dry leaf on the ground. And that single image of a dry leaf revealed to me life. It revealed to me the outcome of nature. So we have to utilize or at least find the proper way to value the light of human consciousness, this candle flame lit in the darkness. So that's the value of the human being, a rare opportunity, not like, I'm stressed, life is too heavy for me to carry. Why is there suffering? Oh no. I mean, of course there is suffering, but there's also intelligence. So we have to ask a question: why does an intelligent being suffer? If you were not intelligent, if you could not see new spaces, if you could not be aware of the zero dimension, you wouldn't be able to move in a new way. So space is very crucial. We even need space between the sentences. We need silence, a full appreciation of silence before we can speak well. We need a full appreciation of stillness before we can move well. So that's like neo philosophy, where philosophers are like, "Yo, man, are we even human? Like, what does it even mean to be human on a rock in the middle of nowhere? Like, are we dressing ourselves in colorful language and feeling proud of abstraction? That means there was a very strange moment where I remember I saw this atheist in a debate eradicate this poor man. This atheist destroyed this theist, like with no consideration that that story had a value to their life. You know. Now, even though when you think of a political landscape, you can't really care too much for the individual because the collective system needs to change. But anyways, the atheist had denied the theist, and he's like, "Buddy, you're in a man-made charade. Like, get step out of it." But Then the atheist concluded that free will is an illusion. So that means the one saying that it's a charade doesn't exist. That means it's all man-made. It's all man-made, including the very notion of self. When I say man-made, I mean in regards to the human dimension. I remember listening to Terence McKenna, the scholar, speak about this idea of the archaic revival, and I was like, no way. Like, is the ancient view that gods roam the earth gonna archaically revive again? Do you know? And then I realized the technological singularity of super intelligent computers being more superior intelligence than us because they can update themselves faster than we can control. Like these dogs you see in the wallpaper, there's a very complex advanced AI program in these dogs that is pretty much making them as indistinguishable from a real dog as possible. For me, even the notion of the good and bad has an archaic value. I'm like, for how long am I going to see it? It's like when I look at a coffee cup, the coffee cup isn't good or bad. Do you know, if I compare it to something better, it's bad. If I compare it to something better, it's bad. If I compare it to something worse, it's good. So this good and bad game that human beings have been playing can go endlessly. Just compare it to something else, and then you get morality. So we can say the basis of morality and duality is the comparative mind, the mind that was like, I see this and I see that, and what do these two things mean in correlation? How will we define intelligence? If the arrival is experiential, the language will transform from the inside out. If the arrival is existential, the intelligent arrival is existential, we will transform language from the outside out. That means we can either choose to walk in a different way from just how we approach see ourselves, or the world can come and say walk this way, you know. So that's the thing for me. It's like people who understand freedom, they understand the value of the free will, regardless of if on a material analysis of the free will, like, sure, before the human design there was no free will, you know. You can totally have this idea, who was there to have free will if there was no human being? So it's just you can totally see a sort of illusion, but only if you keep things to a materialistic level. But I find that life matter can't exist alone. So anyways, you confront the zero dimension, you move up to the singular. So your mind is comfortable with space, emptiness, the void, and a realization that phenomena, as the Buddha would say, these are the three jewels: imperfection, impermanence, and completeness. As you realize, nothing in life is permanent. Nothing in life is 100% complete. There can always be greater dimensions. Nothing is 100% perfect. There could always be greater dimensions. You see? These were the three jewels of Buddhism: imperfection, impermanence, and completeness. Once the mind was comfortable with this, you could say, all right, you got a good hold of the zero dimension, you know, for now, you know. And so then there's the singular dimension. So the singular dimension is after you're comfortable with space. This means, like, same with writing. You got to look at the empty piece of paper, and only when you're comfortable enough and you understand the value of the page, you pick up the pen and write, you know, the value of language so far, you know. So once you're comfortable with the singular and the void, the zero dimension and the one dimension, you have witnessed the first existential duality of nothing and everything. That's the first duality. Once you have confronted the singular dimension, that one, it was as if from the singular copied itself and duality was born. I say, the singularity, the singular dimension, the singularity was the mother of duality. The dualistic dimension was the father of the infinite dimension. So what I'm trying to say is, after you're comfortable with a binary way of looking at life as space and singular phenomena in that space, then you go to the dualistic dimension, where that's where I'm speaking to you right now, where you see things in a dualistic way, where there is a self and a world. We are right now, it's like I'm a character, sharing a story, in a story, sharing a story about the story. you know Linguistic inception, okay? So once you're comfortable with the void, once you're comfortable with oneness, once you're comfortable with duality, because you realize duality was sparked from the singular, the number two came from the number one. It was just one was conscious of itself. So the subjective evolution made us into dual creatures. And so once you're comfortable with duality, that is beyond selfhood. That's again a state that's beyond the language, beyond language. So it's beyond the language threshold. Infinity. Infinity is not a concept. At best, it could be consciousness of a speed of intense change, like instant change. I would say, the honestly, for a dualistic entity, infinity is going to not be very different from a sort of instantaneous being or non-being. Out of curiosity, would the listeners be interested in a sci-fi story? We'll create some audience engagement here. If three people want to hear a sci-fi story, I'll share this that relates to the topic. You know. Anyways, I'll be back in 2 minutes, guys. Actually, guys, I think I might have to end the talk a bit quicker than usual. But let me see. Where can I bring all this? We're intelligent creatures. Behind our eyes, the intelligence appears unknown, and in front of our eyes, a certain range of it appears unknown, and the far depths of it is unknown. That means if we consider an inner realm and outer realm, we see a certain range of the inner realm, but I can't see what's happening in the Andromeda galaxy right now. And when it comes to the inner realm, I can see that where my memories happen, that where visualization is like its own room with its own privacy policy. Other you could be beside someone and they can't see your imagination unless you communicate. You know. So I'm saying the inner realms has a depth that is also very purely unknown. This is why I'm saying that once you are comfortable, and once you're comfortable with duality, you also move towards infinity. You can wield infinity. Now, what does infinity mean? This is where so far I have explained that the way man taps it based on the way we're defining man in 2020 is as a hollow infinity. That means it's a simulation of infinity, yet the infinity could be void. That means from one side, we are dualistic creatures, yeah, to infinity and beyond. But beyond infinity, the other side of infinity, the other side of the wall of infinity could be emptiness. So once you're comfortable with the void, with the zero dimension, with stuff being singular, with people realizing they are singular, they're individual people, you know, that means you should just respect the idea of people, you know, as a human being, even general. That it's honestly a space for human expression to become collective. That means the more we understand about infinity, the more we're going to be fascinated by the idea, the collective vision of our species, the collective expression of our species. Because I'm like, I just have, suddenly I feel like I have a thought. Then I looked at the planet and I'm like, the planet, we are like the thoughts of the planet suddenly popping out. You know, the planet's like, hey, what if I, you know, created this? You know? And this became like Timmy from across the neighborhood, you know, like it was like creaturehood, you know. The emergence of creaturehood seems to be a creative effort of the universal sector of the space. So really, human beings have contained themselves individually through language. Yet there's many the phenomenological landscape. There's parts of it where you can't contain it as an individual through language. So some things in life you can just see. You can't even say or do anything about. They're just movement. And certain movements, yeah, you can comment on, you can ride the waves, you know, and whatnot. So once we realize, just like how people are relaxed with there being different seasons, now the attention of the human being can become comfortable that there's different dimensional seasons. There's certain moments in life where the value of it is very empty. It's just like you're being mind. Like consciousness is simultaneously the happening of the mind. And the mind is being attributed to the brain. So we're thinking the mind is also simultaneously the occurrence of the brain. And then we're thinking about where is the brain. And that's where, beyond the processing of the mind, we don't even know what the outside world is. You know? So there's a lot of unknown, like people, I don't know how we're raising children in this world, but if the child thinks human beings know and is too proud of the knowledge of humanity, we won't explore the unknown. We should be more proud of the future knowledge, you know. That means there's always more. You can always refresh the browser of life and try to see a different angle. Even Einstein says you cannot solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. That means the person, the winner, or let me say it like this: the solution is a different. The solution is looking at the same thing with different eyes than how you're looking at the problem. So any problem you want to solve, you know that the moment you solve it, that view is 100% going to be different than how you saw the problem at first. You're just seeing different dimensions. So we have to honor intelligence. We have to study it both from its known dimensions and unknown dimensions. If I was to design an educational system, I would just be like unknown studies and known studies. There you go, folks. You want to wonder about the unknownness of reality, and you want to wonder about what is known so far. And the unknown would be unknown studies, would be human beings who are more interested in asking questions than believing in answers. And we can say that we are, or let me rephrase that. The unknown studies are those who want to see the evolution of the knowledge, and known studies are those who want to see the maintenance of the knowledge. So there's some people who want to see more, and there's some people who want to just see the same thing continue more. And, you know, hopefully as a global community emerges, language through honest experience of human beings changes. That means that's what you see in film. When you see at film, when you look at the film industry, they said something that there was this actor from the Avengers movie, I forget his name, but he says that the birth of the superhero was the death of the movie star. You know, and what that means is that means most likely movie stars will probably in stories, fantasy is there. I think like right now it's like Avengers, technology, Transformers, and all this. I think there's going to come a huge upheaval of a surfacing of a fantasy context in the entertainment industry. Let me tell you something fascinating. The more gaming technology increases and the more films advance, you're going to see at some point the audience doesn't want to just watch the film, they want to go and live inside the film. So I feel the future of the film industry and the gaming industry they're going to meet, you know? So that means the gaming industry and the film industry, which are these giant, giant markets, they're going to be like giant. They're going to be like, it's going to be a Titanic situation, but it's going to be two giant ships hitting each other. Now, it's either going to be a situation where they're going to merge the two ships and suddenly fix the situation. you know, there should be like a two-ship system where imagine there's the Titanic and then there's a bigger ship than the Titanic, twice the size, with one uh, with like half of it empty. In case something happens to the ship, people can just walk over a bridge to the other ship, imagine. The infusion of these two sectors would mean that art is strangely not going to die. Human beings are gonna seek it differently. Because right now there's gonna come a renaissance cyberspace art, which is gonna be way more than just a human being drawing something. It's gonna be a cyber state art where probably in the future there's gonna be awards for this. The best gaming company that created a virtual realm that was indistinguishable from reality. The same way we see in Silicon Valley, certain companies around, and not just in Silicon Valley, around the world, um, tech companies seeking to get to AI quicker. Similarly, in gaming, we're trying to get to indistinguishable games from reality as well. You know, a lot of life is observance of design, And then the person can choose to consciously administer a value in the moment, to project a value in phenomena. So anyways, guys, I hope this talk has been helpful. I'm trying to develop a community of a network of advanced communicators. Feel free to check out the links in the description or whatever. Anyways, our presence is the intelligence, and arrival, the concept, has to do with the personality. So how you are being aware that your personality is present based on the known and unknown variables of the moment can be said to be intelligence. The true consideration of intelligence. You're looking at something as it is, as the Zen masters say, and then analysis is arising from experiential input. Indirect conceptual analysis, let's say. So anyways, guys, blessings. Thanks for tuning in.